So I've had this video idea for a while, but I didn't actually start filming it because I was waiting for RYYZN playing cards to come in. Anyway, I've been collecting cards for about 4 years, deck after deck after deck. Some decks I love, other decks I just don't. And so I thought, what if I tried to take some of the deck features that I like, combine them, and bam, I'll have my dream deck. No, not that deck, but just a dream deck of cards that has all the features I would want in a deck of cards. Now obviously this is all opinion based, and my opinions change all the time, and also sometimes I even just have bias towards the designer, especially with RYYZN playing cards. But let's just pretend there are fewer limits. Not zero limits, but just fewer limits. So I still want to be somewhat realistic, but if I had to design my perfect deck, like what it would look like, how it would feel, maybe even the design or the box a little bit, then these are just the characteristics that would go with it. Disclaimer though, I'm not actually making a deck of cards. These are just ideas for a video, or at least I'm not making a deck of cards right now. I'm just discussing the different features and options that I like to have in the decks that I use, so hopefully that makes sense. And also, before we really get started, this is kind of an open discussion, so be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And with that, we can get started. Alright, so the first thing is the price. Preferably, a good price would be like $10. That's like Theory11 quality cards, or Riffle Shuffle, which I personally think are really high quality cards. Now obviously I haven't gotten into all the features, but based on what I've seen with other decks, a realistic price would probably be about $20. So if I were actually to make a deck of cards, I would want it to be about $12.50 to $15. Okay, so moving on to the feature that I 100% would want in this deck of cards would be the Karshi Touch C92 Touch Finish. It is my favorite card stock because it fans well and packet cuts well, and my Karshi Touch decks that I have still handle great to this day, even though I've had them for a few years, so it lasts pretty long. Now I believe the stock or the paper is normal size thickness, so it's not crushed or anything, but that's fine with me. But anyway, moving on to the design now. Now again, this is not me designing an actual deck of cards, but parts of a design I would like is not too minimalistic, but also not too busy. I do like minimalistic designs like Anyone decks or Fontaine decks, but I also like more intricate decks like RYYZN playing cards or Theory11. But sometimes too much on the extreme can be too much, so a deck kind of in the middle of minimalism and intricateness would be nice. Some decks that I think would be in the middle, in between detailed but also not too busy. Some decks have special design features like tally hos with the circle or broken borders. For my dream deck, it doesn't have to include those, but they would of course make the deck look more interesting. Although I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I prefer not having any broken borders, because sometimes the broken borders are also not perfectly lined up, and that just kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. So that's why I probably wouldn't want a broken border. Now for borderless, it's kind of like the same way with the broken border. Sometimes it doesn't always match up, and I just am so used to cards having borders because most decks have borders, so thin borders would be nice. And with the circles, they can look nice, but they aren't required to make all your flourishes look good, especially since not every flourish requires spinning or rotation of a packet. Preferably some color in the design. Monotone decks can get boring over time, and it just isn't as appealing, of course. I would prefer at least 2 colors, something that can match with an outfit I have. Now for the faces, I like a good mix of minimalistic but also not too standard. So like for most Fontaine decks, a lot of the faces are just bicycle standard, but I don't really like that too much because it's just bicycle standard. You'll see that on every deck. So some customization or even just recolors would be fine with me. For example, I like how organic playing cards adds like foods to the court cards, to where they're like, you know, eating the food or doing something with it, you know, just changing the court cards up and recoloring some of the pips. Now on the other hand, I'm not a fan of things that are too crazy where it's harder to recognize the cards. I do like the standard suits, hearts, spades, clubs, diamonds, and not like shapes. So once again, a good mix between nothing that I would consider too boring, which is just bicycle standard, but also nothing too crazy to where I can't recognize what the card is in case I want to play games. And that also takes away the possibility of having a repeating design. The repeating design can be cool, but you obviously can't play cards with that. Sometimes you also just get sick of that design, so none of that for my dream deck at least. And other features like foiling and gilding are not necessary for my dream deck. Of course they can look cool, they're shiny and all that, but sometimes they also just ruin the handling of the cards, and of course it'll also drive up the price. And also the gilding or the foiling just makes me want to use the cards less because I'll be too afraid to ruin them. But I want to use the cards, so that takes away the foiling and the gilding. And finally, the box of this deck. What would the box look like? How will it open? First thing out of the way, I don't need it to be a fancy box. For example, the Card Mafia deck boxes or the card collage, like a dream deck doesn't have to have an origami box. That of course would also drive up the price. Depending on the design of the deck, maybe a flap on the long edge instead of the flap on the short edge would be cool. Now a feature I would want to have on the box would maybe be some embossing or texture to the box instead of it being completely flat cardboard. A good example would be Theory11 decks, which have both good embossing and good designs, as well as thicker cardstock or cardboard that makes the box feel more durable instead of just like a papery box. And sometimes the boxes are also matte. That's not exactly necessary, but that could also be a nice feature on the box. Now I would prefer if the box and the cards don't 100% match. So like for Theory11, again, that's a good example of where they match, but they're not 100% alike. Now, a countering example would be Orbit. I don't like really how they have that white border. It's like you put the actual card on top of the box. For my dream deck, I wouldn't want that. Just as long as the box design matches the theme, kind of like with the Play Dead or the Serious B. Now with Serious B, that box is a little bit too plain, in my opinion. Too much empty space. And this is just a small thing, but color inside the box would be nice instead of it being just plain old white. So yeah, I think that's about everything. Hopefully this video made sense. But to summarize, I would like kind of middle of the road amount of detail and color. Some recolors or a little bit of customization on the faces would be nice. Of course, C92 touch stock for the handling. And a box with color on the inside and outside. And the box has a design that matches the design of the cards. But it doesn't have to be the exact same. As in the back of the card doesn't look exactly the same as the back of the box. As long as the themes match. And the box needs to be durable and maybe even open in a more unique way besides just a flap on the short edge. And hopefully all this could fit into a price of $15 or less. Now obviously I've never made a deck of cards, so I don't actually know exactly how expensive all this stuff would be. So just taking a guess, it'd probably be more than 15, but if possible, less than $15 would be nice. And again, this is all I would consider just to be ideal. Just things that I like in a deck. Sorry if some of this stuff seemed really general and not very specific and just maybe too broad or something like that. I was just trying to think of a different video idea to do, and this was it. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and be sure to comment your thoughts down below, and be sure to also like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time.